Throughout history, the world around us has provided the resources to bring all kinds of ideas to life. Early hunters and gatherers quickly saw the value of glass-like stones for making spearheads, arrows, darts, and tools for processing hides, bones, and wood. With the rise of agriculture, clay became essential, used for both pottery and construction. Over time, humans mastered metals, a development that shaped both the past and our modern world in ways that are hard to overestimate. As civilization progressed, its appetite for resources only grew. Today, humanity extracts almost everything it possibly can, hydrocarbons, ores, minerals, and turns them into things that will end up in the trash within months or years. Unfortunately, durability has been on a downward spiral for decades because manufacturers need to keep selling more and more products. But planned obsolescence and consumer-driven economies are a topic for another time. What's more intriguing is this: what if, at a crucial moment in history, a key resource simply wasn't available? Say, metals didn't exist at all. That's the question I'm tackling today. But first, let's address something else. Could civilization have even emerged without metals in the first place? When the first cities and writing systems emerged, people still didn't know how to extract iron from ore, yet they had been using native metals for thousands of years. These are metals found in their pure form in nature, gold, silver, and copper being the most well-known. They weren't crucial for making tools, but no matter where you look, the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, or South America, people knew about and used non-ferrous metals. So, imagining civilization without them is already quite a stretch. One thing to clarify: civilization isn't some invention or grand design. It emerged much like a chemical reaction, occurring wherever farming communities produced more food than they needed to survive. No matter the region, this surplus led to the rise of a social class that didn't farm but instead used force to claim a share of the harvest. Over time, tax collection systems evolved, giving rise to writing, bureaucracies, and armies, tools used to control populations and fend off rivals. That's why I don't quite get those who brag about their civilization being the oldest. That's like bragging about going to jail early. For thousands of years, the standard of living for farmers barely improved, sometimes even got worse, and often lagged behind that of societies that never formed formal states. For most of history, access to the benefits of civilization has been a very recent development. But let's get back on track. The biggest problem a world without metals would face? Agriculture. It was the foundation of the economy, or more accurately, it was the economy. Barter ruled, and even coins were initially valued only for their weight in metal, just like any other raw material. Farming was relatively easy in the fertile river valleys of the Middle East, India, China, or the floating gardens of the Aztecs. But things got trickier in the colder, harsher lands of Europe and Asia. Take the Cucuteni Tripelia culture, for example. Their farming tools were almost identical to those used in the great civilizations, mainly hoes made of bone or antler. In the naturally fertilized floodplains of warm river valleys, where multiple harvests per year were possible, such tools were enough to create food surpluses and support urban life. But in what is now Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, not so much. And if we look even further north, like Scandinavia, even in the Middle Ages, despite adopting key elements of civilization, they never fully developed a feudal system. The harsh conditions of these lands forced people to find alternative ways to survive, either through trade or raiding wealthier farming societies. By the 2nd millennium BCE, farming tools resembling plows and ards started to appear. The plow, to clarify, is a heavier tool that turns over the soil. The ard, on the other hand, is simpler, only cutting a shallow groove. But plowing requires certain conditions. You need strong oxen to pull it, and the soil has to be free of roots, stones, or anything that could break the tool. That's why, even though the Romans invented a wheeled plow, the simpler ard was still widely used in the Russian Empire well into the 19th century, and even in some areas at the beginning of the 20th. A single horse could pull such a structure. When encountering obstacles, the ard usually just skipped over them. In southern, steppe, and forest steppe regions, the more efficient plow was often preferred. However, both tools depended on metal. An ard needed a steel-edged share, while plows in parts of Europe by the 19th century were entirely made of steel. Beyond the development of new metal tools, farming methods evolved continuously. Initially, humans practiced a two-field system, one part cultivated, the other left to rest. Later, more complex crop rotation systems emerged. In medieval Europe, the three-field system allowed for surplus food production, fueling feudalism and the rise of states. There was also growing awareness of the need for fertilization, something many modern gardeners still overlook. If you harvest 5 buckets of tomatoes, you must return an equivalent amount of organic material to the soil, including roots, stems, and plant matter to prevent depletion. Soil degradation remains a major issue today. The challenge in regions with only one growing season per year was the need for fast planting and harvesting. Without metal tools, productivity would have plummeted, likely preventing the formation of organized states, often synonymous with civilization. In areas where multiple harvests per year were impossible, civilization without metal likely wouldn't have developed at all. In fact, farming itself might not have been worth the effort. Why struggle with wooden tools when animal husbandry is far less reliant on metal? The Tripoli culture, with its primitive farming, mysteriously disappeared, possibly due to encounters with nomadic herders from the steppes, who played a major role in shaping European populations. In a world without metal, much of Eurasia would likely have been dominated by herding societies. For various reasons, including hygiene, nomadic pastoralism would have been the most practical option. Could nomads establish stable states? Hard to say, but arrows with bone or flint tips are still deadly, especially in a world without metal armor. This means interactions with southern farming societies would have been complex. Occasionally, a nomadic leader might have conquered a farming state and established a dynasty, as often happened in Asian history. As for technology, a world without metal would likely have retained Neolithic-style tools, long blades made of flint or obsidian, useful for cutting, scraping, sawing, and processing wood, horn, and bone. These tools cut as well as metal, but wear out faster. And unlike metal, they can't be sharpened, only chipped anew. This means flint deposits would have been rapidly exhausted, requiring deep mining, as seen in the Neolithic era. An alternative to flint and obsidian could have been glass. The Egyptians learned to produce it over 5,000 years ago. Glass was made by melting sand, limestone, and alkalis in furnaces. Large chunks could be broken into razor-sharp blades. Modern researchers use glass to practice ancient knapping techniques because its properties closely resemble flint and obsidian. In a metal-free world, the Stone Age could have given way to a glass age, with artisans experimenting to improve the material. Ceramic production would likely have advanced as well, with some ceramics being extremely hard, but also more brittle than metal. However, this wouldn't have solved the problem of farming tools, which need to be both tough and resistant to breakage. The best natural alternatives, wood and bone, simply can't compete with steel or bronze. A scythe is more efficient than even a steel sickle, let alone primitive insert-based tools. While it's possible to imagine civilizations like feudalism without metal, industrialization would have been nearly impossible. For manufacturing and large-scale industry, agriculture must be efficient enough for only part of the population to work the land. Even with an iron-plated plow and a three-field system, over 90% of the medieval population had to toil in the fields. Modern agriculture, however, relies on metal even more. Automation has made grain dirt cheap. In Russia, for example, a year's minimum wage could buy 16 tons of wheat or 22 tons of barley. A medieval peasant would need to cultivate over 30 hectares to get that yield, while often having less than 5. Of course, after the lord took his share, the peasant could take what was left to a miller, pay him with a jug of ale, and turn it into flour and then bread. But today's economy works differently. Now, besides the miller or bakery worker, there's the mill owner, the bakery owner, the truck driver, the logistics company, the tax office, everyone taking their cut. In the end, a ton of finished bread ends up costing the equivalent of nearly 20 tons of raw wheat. I have no doubt that if metals suddenly disappeared today, humanity would eventually find substitutes, synthetics, composites, whatever. But here's the thing. The less surplus a society produces beyond survival needs, the less room there is for innovation and risk-taking. Any deviation from tradition could mean disaster. And on the flip side, when there's plenty of surplus, experimentation flourishes. In a system like ours, where just turning grain into bread involves a dozen different businesses, feudal economics simply wouldn't support that structure. No one could afford the final product. Throughout history, humanity has always found the resources best suited to its needs. This sometimes makes you wonder, is our planet like an egg, perfectly stocked with everything needed for civilization to hatch and grow? But as it develops, it consumes more and more. The big question is, Will civilization break free of the shell, or will it burn through its resources and collapse, becoming not a new organism, but a parasite on the biosphere? One way or another, metals played a massive role in our development. Even the first civilizations without them are a hypothetical stretch, let alone reaching today's level of technology.